Hello everyone, this is Jeff Yo, and today we are going to run through a few interesting use cases on what Duo can actually do to achieve the Zero Trust framework. Now, first of all, let's run through how a Duo push actually works for an end user. So in this example, the user would actually be logging into an application, and through this little demo, we can actually see how user-friendly it is. So the first thing that the user would do is they would actually browse to the application. In this case, it would be the Outlook OA, and the user will key in their username and password and sign into the system. So when they have done that primary authentication, we can see that this is the Duo challenge screen. So this would be the place where users can actually have a few options to authenticate themselves using MFA. They could ask Duo push to happen, and this is the most recommended method because it is FIPS 142 certified out of the box without additional configuration. It uses 4G and Wi-Fi. So the user does not have to have anything else besides their mobile phone with them. If the user did not have good internet connectivity, they could also choose to receive a call from Duo, or they could actually choose the option of entering a passcode sent by an SMS. The other thing that's interesting is we could actually use things like a security key. So we could actually provision a third-party security key like YubiKey, and that can be inserted into the laptop in order for the user to authenticate themselves. And this would happen through the touch of the security key. So let's see what happens when the user inserts that key. So the user have inserted a key into the USB port, and from there we are doing another touch. So as you can see, it's successful and the users are able to start getting their emails. So in the event that users are having issues with Duo, we actually provide self-service remediation. So it is very common that we actually set security policies on the endpoint devices, such as we want to check on the security posture of the endpoint device before they connect in. And this is what happens. We have configured a policy backend to show that the browser is actually out of date, and this is the message that users are going to receive. So we can actually follow the instructions on screen to update the application. So as you can see on screen, what happens is Firefox is currently out of date, and we kind of want to do a update on the application. So let's see how we can do this update. So instantaneously, you see that I'm redirected with a new tab to tell me how to update to the latest version of Firefox. So this would be the step-by-step guide provided directly from Mozilla. Alright, so after that happens and the user manually updates the web browser, they can go through this process again in order to authenticate themselves. But if we have configured a policy to let the users bypass for the moment, they can continue to get a push notification on the system, and from there they can authenticate themselves. Now I'd like to draw your attention to the Duo push. So as you can see, the user's details are actually reflected here, right? What's the user's email address? What's the IP address? What's the location? And what's the time? So this actually enables the user to verify that he is actually connecting into the application and it's not some fraudulent access, okay? So that is how we actually do a Duo prompt to the end users whenever things are not in policy. The other thing that we can do in Duo is we could actually do access control. So access control is actually really powerful because we can actually configure policies around how users access the environment, what components they require, and this is how the end user experience looks like. So in this example, the users are connecting into the Duo SSL VPN. They will key in their username and password and click on log on. And as you can see, they are getting a sad little face with the message that they cannot connect in because they have software that's outdated. So let's see what is allowed. So again, we see that message that Firefox is out of date, and they can go ahead and click on that same link to tell them how to do the update, right? So that will actually help them with the process of updating the outdated software on the endpoint devices. So in another demo, we could actually do things like trusted endpoints. So let's take a look at trusted endpoints. So this is part of the Duo Beyond Edition, and the Duo Beyond Edition allows us to differentiate between a BYOD device and something that IT has issued to the end user. So in this case, the user again connects into the application with the username and password. They sign in, and they get that sad little face saying that access is not allowed because they are using a personal device. So this is because the certificate cannot be found on the endpoint device. It might have been a case where the user has brought their own device and tried to connect to resources provided by IT. So this is how we actually segregate trusted endpoints versus something that's not issued by IT. So that error message tells them exactly what is happening. And we can actually customize this message to tell them to email to their internal support or to call a particular number to get help. So why do we want to prevent unauthorized devices from connecting in? So when we actually do this process, we can ensure that this is actually with the latest patches, that it is issued by IT. It is something that is in the IT inventory, right? So if it's something that's rogue, it might have malware installed on it, knowingly or unknowingly installed on the endpoint device by the user. So this is something that we want to prevent, because it is very common that ransomware is actually transmitted from the end user's device into the network. So these are devices that we want to block from access. So let's take a look at what the experience is like on a mobile device. So in this demo, we are going to see how the user log into Slack. All right. So Slack is a communication application that allows you to communicate with your internal teams. So the user would actually sign in. They'll key in their email address to start the process. They'll click on next. And as you can see here, they need to confirm their email address. So they got an email. And this is the message from Slack telling the user, hey, we need to confirm your email address. So we go ahead and confirm that. We'll select the account to log in. And this is where the magic happens. This is where we actually challenge and interrogate the endpoint device. We are seeing this prompt to say your administrator needs to use Duo Mobile to check if the device is approved for access. So if the user does not have a Duo Mobile installed and is not enrolled, the user will not be able to log into the mobile application. In this case, we will open Duo Mobile, and as you can see here, this is the Duo Mobile page. The system will ask Duo Mobile user to kind of go back into the application, right? So we are checking for permissions, and after the permissions are successful, they are redirected to the page where they receive a Duo prompt. So we'll ask the system to send a push, and from there they'll approve the push, and they will be able to launch the application. So this is how we secure access to applications on the mobile device using the Duo Beyond Edition. And that again brings us to the point of how we actually do trusted endpoints. Okay, so another interesting thing that we could do in Cisco is we can actually integrate with AMP for endpoint. So in this instance, what happens is we are having an integration between AMP for endpoint, which detects endpoint malware, and Duo. So in this instance, we see that the user is connecting to Microsoft, and the user keys in their username and password. From here, we see this sad little face, and it says that access is not allowed. The device has been blocked from accessing this application. Please reach out to your IT administrator or help desk. So what happens back end? Let's take a look at the admin console. Okay, so can actually browse to the reports in the admin console, and we can see that the user has been denied blocked by M4 endpoint. And let's take a look at the details of this authentication. See, we can get granular information when the device has a device health application installed. Okay, so this is the information that we get. Does the endpoint have a firewall? Does the endpoint have encryption or password turned on? Is the security agent up and running? So from there, since we see the message that is blocked by M4 endpoint, let's take a look at the endpoint M4 endpoint administration screen, right? So we actually see that there are incidents, and we can actually take a look at the incidents. So we see that user's endpoint device is kind of isolated and quarantined. So let's take a look at what's happening. Okay, so this actually helps the M4 endpoint administrator identify what is wrong with the endpoint, and in this case, it's actually being blocked because of threats detected on the endpoint device. And once the endpoint has been remediated, this might be quarantining the malware or removing the malware through other means. We can actually mark this as resolved. And as soon as that happens, the user can now log back into the system and restart the authentication. So from here, the user would again go to Microsoft's website, key in his username and password, and from there we can actually see there's no errors anymore. So it means that the issue has been resolved. So we can actually continue that authentication process to send a push, and after the push is approved, they can access the application again. So this is how we achieve security automation using integration of APIs between Duo and M4 endpoint, and it provides us continuous monitoring, because with M4 endpoint, any malware detection that occurs on an endpoint device is straight away shared with Duo, and Duo prevents any application and data access. So this would definitely help us prevent any spread of malware in the environment, and thus enforce the zero trust framework. So let's take a look at how the user experience is like when the user connects into a Cisco VPN. All right. So in this demo, what happens is I do have an iPad, and the iPad has the Duo mobile app installed. So we are going to run through the self-service provisioning for a user using our ASA VPN over here. All right. So what happens is the user would typically key in their email address, and they'll actually continue with a login after they key in the password. So this would be primary authentication. So after primary authentication has occurred, as you can see, the system has detected that the user has not registered an account with Duo before. So they will actually need to start a self-service enrollment process. So we'll start the setup, and the recommended is to use the mobile phone, but with this demo, I'll be using a tablet, and I'll be using a iOS device. So the system prompts and tells the user to download the Duo mobile app from the public app store. All right, so I've already done that step over here. So I will click I have Duo mobile installed. So the system would actually show the user a QR code, and this is to activate the Duo mobile app. The interesting thing about this QR code, we are creating a private and public key pair. The private key is held within the HSM of the iPad, and the public key is held with Duo in the cloud. So I'm going to click on add an account and scan that QR code on my iPad. And in less than a minute, we are able to register that user without the help of IT. So let's continue in the process. So this is a customization page that lets the user decide how they want to log into various services, and they can add multiple devices using this self-service method. Okay, so we're going to continue to log in, and as you can see, enrollment is successful. So without the help of IT, I'm able to do this entire process. I'm able to add multiple devices when I change my phone or if my phone is lost. So let's continue on with the push notification from Duo. And as you can see on my iPad, I've gotten a notification. Again, we are focusing on that user account, the IP address, and the time. So in the event that this is happening off hours and the user is not working, the user can actually click on deny and click on it seems fraudulent. As soon as the user does that, an email is automatically sent to the Duo admin in order to inform them that an incident has been flagged by the user. So this actually enables your end user to become the police in the environment to tell you if an erroneous event is happening. So after the user has clicked on approve, as you can see on my screen, I am now in my VPN. So that is how we actually do self-service enrollment and how we can actually protect external VPN connections, because a lot of times VPNs are the gateway to important data, services, and applications within our data centers. And as you know, compromised credentials is a big concern, especially for VPNs. So this is definitely one of the best ways to protect your VPN solutions. Okay, so in the next demo, I will be showing you how we can actually protect Windows Logon. So Windows Logon is an interesting use case that many of our customers actually use. Okay, so in this little demo, the user will key in their username and password, and they will sign into their laptop. So as you can see, we are protecting that Windows logon with a dual prompt. So in this example, you can actually again choose the dual push, choose a call me or passcode in order to connect into the Windows system. So this would also work for a Windows server. So assuming that you have a sensitive database with a lot of data that you want to protect, before the IT admin access the database server, we can actually protect it using multi-factor authentication. So we can go ahead and send a push, and as soon as the user approves that push, they will be able to log into the Windows environment. Right? So that's how we can actually use Duo to actually protect our endpoints and our servers, provide another layer of technical controls in order for us to secure down the environment. Okay. Another interesting use case that Duo can actually do, we can actually protect SSH connections. All right. So let's take a look at remote SSH connections when it is based on a trusted endpoint. So over here we have a Macintosh and we have a command prompt running. So over here the user will do an SSH connection into the Linux environment. So from there we are redirecting the user using a web browser for them to key in their credentials, and we are using the Duo Network Gateway to perform this verification process. So after the user has keyed in their username and password and clicked on log on, they will be able to continue with that Duo push. And as soon as we approve that Duo push, let's see what happens on the Linux side. As you can see, it's an Ubuntu, and we are actually logged in as the administrator. So let's take a look at what happens if the user is not accepted. Okay, so this again is the Linux system, and we will do an SSH connection into the Linux. We key in the username and password once again, but a sad little face come up. Again, we are able to detect that the user is actually using a personal device. So some of these Linux servers running in the data center might be having sensitive information, running critical servers, or your websites, which are web servers running on Linux. So this is how we can actually protect root access into your Linux environment, which is a great use case to actually enforce that zero trust framework once again. All right, so those are a few use cases that we can actually provide to customers in order to support their environments. And as you can see, we have many integrations, anything from a firewall to a VPN to cloud services. So all of these are things that Duo protect across many different use cases. And if the customer has many different cloud environments, so this is what happens. We can actually do single sign-on. So what is the value of single sign-on? If a user has multiple services, they need to do multiple bookmarks, remember multiple passwords, and in the event that they forget their passwords, it results in a lot of help desk calls. If we implement a single sign-on solution like Duo for the user will just need to remember a single username and password, and after they have done the multi-factor authentication, what would happen is we have a single pane of glass for that user. So with a single click by the user, they can actually single sign on into all of these services, and we can actually enforce a consistent policy across all the applications. So that reduces the number of help desk calls, reduces the number of bookmarks and passwords that a user have to remember, and actually it becomes a lot more productive for the users. So as you can see, with a click, the user can just access all the apps in a very seamless manner. So that would be the end of my demo, and I do encourage you to take a look at the different use cases that Duo is able to offer. Thank you.